The discomfort displacement cycle, why we reenact what we refuse to metabolize. Good old discomfort. How many of us know what that feels like? It's what we all collectively avoid the most in our relationships, families, even in the workplace. In the essay I wrote, we discussed the commute calibration, how on our commute to situations we mentally rehearse the scene before even entering the field. You can find that essay in the YouTube video below. These days, specifically lately, I see our dopamine nation and the nervous systems within it. You see, even with myself right now, I'm full of discomfort. I want to give up, not do anything, and just sleep all day. Anyone else feel that? This past month has been a lot for many of us. The discomfort that lives in what is rough to deal with. We are living in a collective state of preemptive embodiment, and since it's the baseline for functioning for many of us, it's almost normalized at this point. It's a nervous system loop where we carry the storm into the room before we've even turned the knob and walked in. We could be rehearsing it in bed the night before, on the way to work, predicting what the outcome will be so we can stay ready. Whether it's a political argument on the timeline, a walk down the hallway to speak to your teen, or a partner longing for connection, we are witnessing a massive multi-generational failure to metabolize discomfort. This then creates leakage, and you see this avoidance of discomfort show up in many environments. We don't have the skills to process our own guilt or shame. We displace it. We outsource it to our children, our partners, and our algorithms. This is the skipped highway exit of emotional development, and it's why we keep reliving the same chaos. I am convinced that many have experienced arrested development in a lot of areas due to the messaging and modeling growing up, as well as the internalized beliefs we refuse to let go of. Let's zoom out. When I reflect on arrested development, I think of what Dr. Amen stated when he said, parents unconsciously rob their children of self-esteem to build their own. Lately, this has been very true, not out of malice, but out of the desire not to feel bad. When you avoid feeling bad at the cost of your parenting, the cost of your professionalism, and your own self-respect, we end up creating a new version of the same issue many of us grew up in or even survived. How our systems get hijacked. To really get what we're feeling so full of discomfort, right? Let's understand the why. We have to look at how our biology is actually being hijacked by the world we live in. It's not just in our heads. It's a physiological response to a few key things happening in our bodies and our histories. We are physically exhausted from staying ready, which is a hypervigilance that gives us a false sense of safety. What I call carrying the storm into the room, this is what neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett calls predictive interoception coding. Our brains aren't just living in the present. They are constantly guessing what's next based on every past stressor we've ever faced. When we live in that loop of predicting the worst to protect ourselves, we rack up a high allostatic load. This is the literal wear and tear our brains and bodies from chronic stress. That's what happens, right? We aren't just tired or exhausted. Our systems are physically depleted from trying to solve problems that haven't even happened yet. So we're going to pause real quick. I'm going to put a little line so I know exactly where I'm at. I want to go on a little field trip, cognitive field trip. I want you to think, for those of you that have already watched the commute calibration or read that essay, let's pretend and visualize that we are in a car and we're in a roundabout and we just keep going around and around and around and around. Over time, we build up a pressure. That's what I call the pressure cooker energy. Some of y'all are going around this roundabout like 120 miles per hour. And you are wondering why you are depleted and exhausted. My loves, that's why. We're going around, round, 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 round. And that creates a literal wear and tear in our brain. Do you know how deep of an imprint you are putting in the sand? Think of like your brain as like a spongy little thing, and you're carving out indents into it, like you're carving into a tree. Every time you round, 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 you go around that roundabout. And you think that if you're in that looping, that you're protecting yourself. This is what we're supposed to do. And then the side effects, right? The high allostatic load. So our dopamine nation has lowered our tolerance for the hard stuff. We've become so used to outsourcing our feelings to algorithms and quick fixes that we are losing our affective tolerance, which is our actual ability to sit with the hard emotions. So, loves hard emotions. Hard emotions. How do we expect to have relationships with each other, especially romantic ones, if we cannot experience hard emotions? This is the key way. This right here, the minute it hits the somatic, right? Some of us are stuck in top-down processing, so we don't even know what's going on in the body. The top-down process is the loop. The top-down process is the roundabout you're stuck in. Yeah. And we're in there doing the Charlie Day from Always Sunny with the cigarette and the connecting of the dots. We're in that chaos. And understand that chaos represents what's happening in the mind and the nervous system. Could you imagine going on like a ride that just whipped you around and then you're just kind of looking out like frazzly? The frazzly energy is the emotional leakage that the world sees and sometimes even feels, because we're so stuck in the dizziness of all of that we don't even have that awareness to see sometimes. That's our blind spots. We all have blind spots. All right. So the key here is not to perfectify life. Oh my goodness. I've even fallen into this trap. Bloody hell. It's an easy one to fall in. That need to perfectify is in fact another loop. Now you just two looping. You got two loops to loop in. Some of y'all got chains of loops that y'all are looping in, doing laps in. It just becomes another place to avoid. And a lot of times when we're doing this work, what are we truly, truly, truly avoiding? Get deep. Deeper. What are we really avoiding? Not what they think. Not their judgment. Not that external noise. We are avoiding the very difficult emotions within ourselves. That little child that's been crying out to us in symptoms that we've been avoiding. We've been taking teas and doing detoxes instead of facing. And now we're out here experts at pathologizing everybody else's shit. Loops to avoid our own hard emotions. And if we can't even face our emotions, how do we expect others to face them for us? Some of y'all don't even know what they are. You just know you don't feel good. It is uncomfortable. There's discomfort, which is exactly why you loop into the displacement cycle of trying to give that to somebody else. Now, back to the reading. As Dr. Anna Lembeck, 2021, explains in her research on the pleasure pain balance, when we overindulge in high dopamine distractions to avoid feeling bad, our brain counter-regulates by tipping us further toward the pain side. This lowers our affect tolerance, making everyday stressors feel unbearable. The leakage is a family legacy. That leakage I mentioned when we displace our shame onto our kids, partners, whoever, it is a core part of family systems theory. When we haven't reached a high level of differentiation of self, we can't regulate our own internal anxiety. So when we engage in a family projection process, FPP, when we engage in this process, we take our unmetabolized discomfort, all that gunk, all that sediment that y'all won't even touch. With your own gunk, you won't even touch it. And you unconsciously hand it over to the people we love. And I'll give you some examples: nitpicking, complaining, hovering, trying to help. This one I really want to pause on here and emphasize. I'm going to put myself on the chopping block as someone in the helping field. I think there was a lot of us that were former people pleasers or still are people pleasers in this helping field. Goodness gracious, sometimes, and I have a hard time with this because a lot of people show up to the conversation expecting validation and for you to agree with what they say. And then in order for me to handle the discomfort of not wanting to tell them the truth, because we live in a society where not everybody can handle the truth. I'm just going to be completely honest. Not everybody wants the truth. And if they do get the truth, now you're abrasive, now you're this, now you're blah, 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 blah. And so you know what? I'm just going to have to practice listening. It's very hard. It's very hard because I'm in my mind looping, oh my God, the pattern, the blind spot. Because for me, this is just myself, okay? It's like I have something green in my teeth because I ate lunch and I'm having a conversation with people. They all see it and they know I'm about to go on stage and have a speech. And not one person told me that there was that lettuce in my teeth and they allowed me to go on stage with it in my teeth. That's the vibe. For me, I want people in my life that tell me my blind spots, but not everybody does. And then we start tone policing, right? Of course, everything has to be delivered appropriately, but then like the discomfort kind of makes it not perfect. And then we don't do it at all because executive freeze, right? So I'm just putting myself here. That's something I struggle with in my own personal life. As a therapist, oh my goodness gracious, I am watching some of my clients willy-nilly jumping the edge and not knowing why it hurts and why it's happening to them. And I'm like, my girl, you are walking that way. You're walking that way. Guided exploration. Let's go this way. Nope, we want to go right back off the cliff. Sometimes you can lead a horse to water. You cannot make them drink. I don't know how many times I might have to listen to this part repeatedly. Raise your hand if you might have to as well. But I say all of this to say, that's another example of discomfort, right? It's no different than me using humor to remedy or minimize, make less of the discomfort within. The idea is to find what works and still get the job done. But also that can be a two-way road because then people find loopholes to just displace what they want to avoid. So the discomfort displacement cycle of people who, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but who have dreams and aspirations, and then they displace the discomfort of never achieving them on those around them who have achieved their own dreams and aspirations or are in the process of doing so. Does that make sense? It's easy for me to displace the discomfort onto that than sit with what I refuse to face in fear of the unknown of starting. So we can even look like that form of self-sabotage. So basically my point in saying all of this is this creates a multi-generational loop where the next generation inherits a nervous system that is already primed for a storm they didn't even start. Do you see how this can easily become generational? Like that's why I said multi-generational loops. Inheritance. It's that generational trauma y'all always like to put up on stage. All right, but let's go on a journey through examples of how we displace the discomfort and how that becomes a cycle. The parent glitch, discomfort as tradition. A boundary is not a threat, but to a parent without emotional endurance and a severe level of enmeshment, the narcissistic need to be needed, or simply the inability to curate their own life outside of the kids, boundaries feel like an existential rejection. Vecna. They haven't finished the highway of their own development. So when they hit a boundary, especially from their own kids, they glitch. I guess I won't call anymore. Or one of my favorite ones, I might as well just die today. whatever we can reach for. That's the grasping, the guilt trip. Ever felt the heat of those guilt trips, weaponized incompetence, or forms of learned helplessness before? Yep, those are strategies, often unconscious, and that gives us that exit to displace the hot potato of discomfort, all while avoiding the vulnerability necessary to ask for what we need. I feel blank and I'm afraid of losing you or losing access to you or afraid you will outgrow me and never need me. Could you imagine what it would feel like for you to be on the receiving end of vulnerability like that? Especially from a parent or an adult in your life. When we understand much of this behavior isn't malicious and realize it is just a lack of skills, those pesky crayons some of us never got, we can see the cycle more clearly. They reach for the only crayons they have to color that life experience with. Passive aggression, silent treatments, and coercive manipulation that's disguised as family loyalty or a culture. This is nervous system activation hiding underneath the umbrella of these traditions, culture, and faith, even faith. When a parent cannot bridge the repair because their ego refuses the shame of acknowledgement, they dodge accountability and they hand that emotional burden to the child instead, even if that child's an adult. For those of you who do not understand what I am saying when I refer to crayons, there is an article to that essay above called Crayons, Capacity and the Cost of Bypassing Development. This process, often described as a failure of interactive repair, forces the child to adopt compensatory, I think I'm saying it right, compensatory strategies to maintain the attachment bond. Shore, 2012. That's why many of us become people pleasers or develop dismissive and avoidant attachment styles. I hope at the end of my work or at any point in any of my work, some of y'all are understanding the main premise and core foundation is that at the end of the day, we can pathologize, we can label, we can la. What you will then realize is that is just a roundabout loop you're stuck in to avoid the doing of whatever it is, even if it's the doing of greatness, the doing of success, the doing of surrendering to a good, safe partner, the doing to surrendering to love. Love is scary to surrender to. So we loop over here with Voldemort and Vecna, and then we get all these symptoms because of it. Now, excuse me for my little tangent, but what we'll see, the child grows up as an adult who eventually refuses to hold the weight of that system any longer. And this is what I see a lot in family work. This is where emotional cutoffs occur. So according to Bowen, 1978, emotional cutoff is a common way individuals manage unresolved emotional attachments to their family of origin by physically or emotionally distancing themselves. And let me tell y'all have sneaky little ways of doing whatever it takes to avoid that, whatever it is, even if it means emotional cutoffs. And we find so many ways to get away from the parents or whoever it is. So for many family systems that live off the fear of what will people think, this is the last thing the system needs because it draws external attention to the internal dysfunction, meaning if I get emotionally cut off, what will people think? Can you see where the grief is in that? There's multiple nuanced angles of grief. This is what my work is helping our little brains learn. The cutoff. The emotional cutoff pain is valid, but do you see what the mind in that individual is linking it to? Not the actual cutoff of the family member, but the perception of what the others will think. That's the wound. And what my work helps people understand is when we see it for what it is. Because if we're inside of the parent, their nervous system is firing and wiring towards what will people think, right? The person that's on the cutoff side is thinking of the grief that they actually have to do, the discomforting behavior of cutting off. Some of y'all are in avoidance because you're just avoiding it. And that is the why there's a cutoff. You're not willing to face the discomfort of a conversation and or balancing a relationship in a way that is sustainable for you, regardless of what the parent thinks. Sometimes that doesn't automatically mean a cutoff needs to happen. It just means you have to learn how to implement the boundaries and face the discomfort that comes with implementing the boundaries until your brain has fired and wired the pathway, and now you can walk it like a boss. Okay. Let me get back to the point. When you're in the child role or the adult child role, you're feeling the grief of having to let that parent go. You're feeling the grief of having to cut off because they're not getting it or whatever the mind is telling you. That's also a grief. And so I'm going to go real back just a bit. When we're in that moment, when we're not seeing it from the parent's angle, how they're reaching for the only crayon that they have to color that life experience with, meaning I'm being emotionally cut off. What am I going to use in this experiment, in this moment right now? What skills do I have in my toolbox? What crayons do I have in my box? If you read that essay, you'll know that some of us maybe got one crayon and some paper. Some of us got 10, some of us got 5, some of us got none. So we're basing it off of what we saw. Passive aggression, silent treatment, coercive manipulation, disguised as family loyalty. All of that was what we didn't see we were doing as the parent. And then there was a leakage, and it came out as onto our children. And what we're seeing now is our children are now our adults, and they're emotionally cutting off from us. And we can't handle the discomfort of that. So then what are we doing? That we're looping in that what will people think? Our child is looping in whatever they're looping in terms of the realization of internalizing a belief. Maybe it's like, wow, they don't even care. All they care is what people think, right? Not realizing that nervous systems are in different timelines, experiencing not reality. And we just want the discomfort of that not reality to go away. And that is creating injuries all around, literally. And what we're not understanding is the generations before us, they had the ability to use the umbrella of tradition, culture, and even faith and religion to kind of mask and hide all of this, if that makes sense. So again, when a parent cannot bridge the repair because their ego refuses the shame of acknowledging it, of that acknowledgement, they'll dodge the accountability and hand that emotional burden to the child instead. And then that child grows up, does the emotional cutoff, and then we're in this process. Now, this process, often described as a failure of interactive repair, forces the child to adopt compensatory, we've already been here, I'm saying it again, compensatory strategies to maintain the attachment bond. That's why many of us become people pleasers and develop dismissive and avoidant attachment styles. This child grows up as an adult who eventually refuses to hold the weight any longer. We just reflected on all of that again. Now, many of us are stuck in egocentric loops where we think everyone is watching and judging us, when it's really just us hyperanalyzing ourselves. This heightened self-consciousness is often a byproduct of hypervigilance, which is a state where the nervous system is constantly scanning for social threats to maintain safety. Porges 2011. The family system is often built on the individual holding what many other family members refuse to hold. That is how the discomfort gets displaced. It's easier to pass it like a hot potato using covert means that can look like love, care, inquiry to the naked eye. For those of us attuned to these dynamics, we see it for what it is, control. We would rather pass the heat of discomfort elsewhere than to sit and process through it. Hold that thing. All right. Emotional displacement and the software of shame. So, unresolved trauma, sibling wounds, and cultural pressures, they don't just disappear, they get displaced. Parents who never dealt with their own abandonment will project those pieces onto their adult kids. Now, get this. For those parents who are so worried about becoming like their parents, be careful now. You may end up creating a new version of the same problem, like I said before, simply because you are more concerned with being liked, seen as good, and you don't want to feel the discomfort of being mean, assertive, or like your parents. When I say this with love. Tough love saves lives. It is a bit selfish to prioritize your own discomfort over the need to parent your children. You don't want to feel bad, so you don't demand the respect from your children by implementing consequences, follow through with what you say, and being consistent. As parents, what many don't understand is that conditions the child to develop and grow up into this belief that everyone outside of you will say yes to them and that there are never natural consequences to their actions. That is not setting your kid, your teen, your adolescent up for success. It's setting you up for comfort. See, what Dr. Amen means when he says that this is where he says that parents are robbing their children of self-esteem to build their own. That's an example of that. Many moms who overfunction only do so out of their activated survival self, their ASS, which is a set of behaviors learned as a child that they never unlearned. Now, many moms overdo it out of their own need to soothe feelings of guilt and shame. We often don't want to feel the discomfort of our own unresolved behaviors or past decisions, so we overfunction for the child. You may simply be learning how to be yourself outside of being a mother, wife, father, or husband. But every time you feel guilt for going to the gym, going out, going on your vacation, doing something where you aren't just prioritizing the kids, you feel bad. That discomfort is the intensity many couples do not want to face. So, where do you think it gets displaced? You guessed it, the partner. When we zoom in on conditioning, we have to look at the internalized patriarchy within very women we try to measure up to. This internalized patriarchy is also what raised many of our husbands. In clinical terms, this is often linked to gendered socialization and the internal locus of control. While women are often socialized towards communal overfunctioning, men are often conditioned towards agency and compartmentalization. Helgenson, 1994. Many men have the mechanism to prioritize themselves and compartmentalize effectively. Consequently, women who overfunction often meet men they deem as underfunctioning. Boys are mothered in ways girls are not. If you scan your upbringing, you may see that many mothers do not feel they have the same safety to raise their sons with the same emotional expectations, often due to the influence of their own mothers or mother-in-laws who overshadow their parenting with their sons. Now, in my work with men and couples, the data shows that many men have no problem prioritizing their needs. Not necessarily in a selfish way, as much as we will perceive it that way, ladies. But it's through a capacity for compartmentalization. This is where Alison Armstrong's work thrives here. Now, this is a skill many women could learn to adopt, but instead, many activate into their external locus of control loop. That's that roundabout y'all are driving around now in your mind. You go into that external locus of control just due to the fear that if you actually did compartmentalize like them, you'll be judged for it. They'll have a comment, they'll say something. This is where women may start demanding, expecting, or even engaging in covert forms of coerciveness to get their needs met. Now, let's pause here real quick, okay? In this part, what I'm trying to conceptualize is the idea that men could teach us ladies a thing or two about learning how to compartmentalize, learning how to shelf things. I don't know about y'all, but I am not a shelfer. I am a right nower. I am a right nower. Crisis, fire. I have had to learn and see. Some of us have the ability of masking the intensity and not to a state of suppression, but to a skill state, because we can't just be crashing out if we're at work or if we're in certain situations. We've learned that art. That's why some of us can collapse and break down in moments where we didn't even realize because the buildup needed to be emptied, if that makes sense. So men in a way are teaching women something that we can adopt, but we don't want to. Why? Because the discomfort of the fear and the discomfort of that fear of being perceived as being judged for doing it. I'm trying to do what they're doing and prioritize myself. They're going to judge me for it. So now you're avoiding that discomfort of that perceived judgment, even if they make a comment, right? You're going to avoid the discomfort of even having to experience the comment, but more so, because the work means letting them have the comment, right? So if I pass through level 1 of allowing them to have the comment, and now I got to do level 2, sitting in the discomfort of not doing anything about the comment. And that means not looping in your mind as a way to talk yourself out of doing what you are compartmentalizing yourself. I'm not going to overfunction by clean the house and do all this. What are the kids? I'm going to go for a walk. I can't go for a walk. I have kids. I'm going to leave the kids with their parent. I don't have a father. I'm going to leave the kids with a family member. Or I'm going to take the kids with us. Strap them things to my body, okay? Y'all love to bring up the ancestors and what they used to do, but y'all aren't doing it either. You can strap your baby on your back. I see people on the trails all the time with their babies, with their kids, with their toddlers. Let that energy out in the best way possible with nature. Even if it's for a little bit, we can do things for a little bit. But you see that? We don't want to sit in the discomfort of now we actually have to do it because there's a strategy that we can try. Oh, it costs too much energy. Oh. So then we go into another loop of I don't want to waste my energy. Not now. You see how the brain traps us in these loops? Now, one of the loops that women frequently fly on, y'all got these frequent flyer miles on this route, okay? Due to that perceived fear of being judged, even if there is a comment, to avoid it, now you start demanding, expecting, or even engaging in those covert forms of coerciveness. So you won't ask for it or take it yourself. You will now try to guilt trip it, your way of getting it, right? You want your husband to father or husband you exactly the way you seem fit. In psychology, an external locus of control is a major clue that the nervous system activation is present, Rotter 1966. Control is the biggest illusion of safety now. Women were conditioned to overfunction, especially for men, to cook, clean, and do it all. Many men were never required to provide reciprocity in emotional availability. Hear that part again. Many men, didn't say all, many men were never required to provide reciprocity in emotional availability. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Because if they had a mother that was surviving by doing, she didn't need him to have emotional availability. She just needed him to need her. Right? Which is why it says because their mothers were in a state of survival. For those mothers doing that was what disassociated them for their shadows, their grief, their trauma, even their marriage, right? If they're unhappy, they're disassociating from their unhappiness into overdoing for their kids. And then women, we get hit a little differently because then they don't want us to go through what they're going through, so they mother us in a very different way. See how this isn't about blame? It's about holding the grief of, it's like walking in the shoes of the people before us instead of pointing at them with our angelicness. Now, the overfunctioning, however, did provide a loophole for men to simply wait for the woman to lead. Think about how often women meet for brunch or talk in group chats about how unhappy they are and how their husbands don't do XYZ. Yet when I ask what they want, many just say effort. If you cannot pinpoint what effort looks like concretely with examples, you are setting a booby trap. All right. According to research on adult attachment and communication, vague expectations often lead to a demand withdrawal pattern. This, in return, leaving the partner in a state of executive freeze because they feel like no matter what they do, they will fail. Gottman, 1994. Ladies, think about your mothers. How often did you feel that nothing you did was good enough? Is it possible you have created the same hurdle for your partner and your children unconsciously? What is effort when you don't even give yourself effort by your daily habits and your routines? What came up when you read that, hear that, however you are downloading it into your brain. See how focusing on what our partners, coworkers, bosses, kids, or family are not doing frees us from the necessity of actually facing the discomfort of doing it, learning it, asking for it, or initiating it, whatever the it is. Pointing outward frees us from looking within at what we choose to neglect in ourselves. I know. But let's do a quick example for funsies, okay? This is a very common one. Let's say you had goals, dreams, and aspirations for your career, but kids, marriage, and life diverted you off the path. Years later, you never actually started. Where do you think the buildup of that grief goes? It is often channeled into an undercurrent directed at your partner. It's easier now to get on them for every little thing, giving a nervous system that is addicted to being bothered something to feast on. So all you don't actually have to face the ache of a choice. We have the free will to change our lives in a snap. And that fact alone is daunting. That thought puts the power back in our hands. And that power is the hot potato of discomfort we would rather displace on our partner. This dynamic is often described in clinical literature as emotional reactivity within a system. When we cannot manage our own internal distress or unfinished business or businesses, we engage in what is known as functional shift, focusing on the perceived inadequacies of others to regulate our own sense of self. Kerr and Bowen, 1988. One of my favorite challenges is one I often have to use on myself, all right? I got to do this work too. When I want to hyper-focus on my husband and the enmeshment dynamic that he may or may not have with his mother, feeling the frustration and emotional intensity that comes with a mother-in-law who weaponizes religion, softness, and doing to mask all of that, it's easy for me to be righteous in my psychological knowledge. I have to name that and put that on the table. But look at the very boundaries we ladies demand our husbands to have with their parents, their moms, dads, whoever. Now I want you to look at the relationships you have with your parents. Do you talk? Can you communicate boundaries or tell them no? Can you let them know when they are overstepping? Or do you ask to get out of things through avoidance and people pleasing? If the answer is no, you are being a hypocrite, my dear. I had to look deep into this mirror myself. Our situation is a bit unique since my mother-in-law moved in with us 2 years ago. Making boundaries is a very necessity at this point, but when we are caught in our own web of codependency or enmeshment, the inability to say no comes with the very discomfort we do not want to face. We displace it by focusing on what our partner is failing to do as a way to manage our anxiety through an external locus of control. That is classic external locus of control. Moms, all of the reasons you're coming up with for why you cannot leave your husband alone with the kids is either your external need to control or the deep-rooted reality that you don't trust him. And that's a deeper issue that you probably want to avoid because it means you might have to make some decisions that you don't want to deal with. So it's better to just stay and then cast all that discomfort of resentment onto him by controlling him, which is essentially putting yourself in a prison, because then you don't have your independent life. And a lot of ladies and just couples in general, we don't want a life because it means our husbands might want one and we don't want them to have one. This is where Alison Armstrong's work is living and thriving here, because women, we do need to have our own life outside of our husband, outside of any relationship, really. Now, from a neuroscience perspective, this is a matter of Hebbian's plasticity. The principle that cells that fire together wire together. When we consistently fire and wire the neural pathways that focus on lack and external blame, We effectively prune away our ability to perceive agency or gratitude. Heb 1949. This displacement cycle becomes a psychological habit. That loop, that roundabout I was telling y'all frequent flyers on. We are conditioning our brains to scan for deficits. That, remember that? If we're scanning for deficits instead of blessings, reinforcing a state of survival rather than one of growth. When we're constantly in that loop, when we're constantly scanning for deficits, we miss the blessings. We miss all that stuff y'all are making vision boards for, manifesting, praying for. We're missing it. We've missed every positive moment of connection with our husband. We're not looping with those. We're not in the ball pit of all those little instances. No, no, no. We're in the fire of what he didn't do or what she didn't do. Biology versus betrayal. The half-assed hug debate is something I notice in many systems, but it also serves as a metaphor for whatever action you want to replace hugging with. Let's look at the emotional authenticity of hugs within families and how a system navigates when someone says no to physical touch. As always, put your gloves on here. It's time to bring nuance into the discussion. In some families, due to culture, religious beliefs, messaging, and modeling, the idea of affection is seen as a sign of respect. That's one cube on the block. However, second cube on the block. We also live in a society that is conditioning entitlement, and we have to name this. That's that second cube. We often think that just because of what we feel, we are entitled to be rude or disrespectful. In reality, agency and body protection measures have nothing to do with a lack of respect. That's another block. Respect is becoming a dying art, so let's just name that too. Okay. Now, hugging is a part of a sign of respect for some. That's true. There is an entitlement culture being bred. That is also true. Respect is becoming a dying art. That is also true. Now, the extremists, I already know which one y'all are waving at. All the extremes are in that other block. But that's the block some of y'all are looping in and you are projecting as your reality. And sometimes it's not the extreme. It's just your fear of being being in discomfort. You think that everything has to be comfortable for you, and you don't think that's narcissistic? Interesting. Again, wear your gloves here. We're sitting with nuance. Now, this is a biological reality. When the nervous system is activated, our perceptual range narrows, and we often interpret neutral cues as hostile. This is where splitting lives. All right, that's a borderline trait. We cannot force a connection when the body is organized for conflict. This state of neuroception, the internal process of scanning for safety or threat, it dictates whether we are even capable of social engagement. Porgs, 2011. With that being said, we also have to acknowledge that many generations before us were conditioned to grin and bear it, forcing children to engage with family members who were behaving inappropriately behind closed doors. The family might even know about the behavior and still force the child to engage because they don't want to look bad, feel bad, or make a scene. What parents do not realize when they engage in this level of dismissive avoidance is the wound they unconsciously create. By protecting yourself from scrutiny, you create a breach of trust between you and the child. Over time, research shows that this lack of attunement and rupture without repair leads to insecure attachment patterns. Siegel and Hartzell, 2003. This child grows into an adult who may eventually stop engaging with you entirely due to what you refuse to acknowledge. This is the discomforting consequence of dismissive avoidance in parenting. We are so focused on immediate relief in the now that we don't think about the long-term future. When our selfish need for comfort overshadows the needs of those we love, we enter into the territory of narcissism, a topic I know everybody loves to talk about. In clinical terms, this is often a form of narcissistic parentification, where the child is expected to regulate the parent's ego and social standing at the expense of their own bodily autonomy. Miller, 1981. The rupture of growth. One of the hardest truths to swallow is that development is not just a duet, it's a relay. Just because you have evolved doesn't mean your partner, parents, or coworkers automatically will. When we deem ourselves morally righteous in what we have learned and demand that the environment meet us there, we slip into a form of narcissism. Demanding that the world change to accommodate our new awareness is not an act of embodiment. It is a retreat into external locus of control. There you are again. Hi, I see you. Frequent flyer to external locus of control loop, where the illusion of safety lives. An internal locus of control, by contrast, is enforced through boundaries, saying no to your kids and providing consequences without trying to soften the sting by picking up their favorite food just because they can't sit with their own anger or discomfort, right? Sometimes in our brains, we try to sandwich approach it sometimes, or soften the blow by doing other things to counteract the boundary that we enforce that we don't want to sit in that discomfort of, right? So and an example of this in a romantic relationship is an internal locus of control means finally doing something for yourself without scanning the environment, the kids, the partner, the moods, to find a loophole that lets you out of choosing yourself. He might do this. I could tell in his tone this. I can tell in her XYZ that. And then all of that loop becomes a reason why you don't act on what your assignment is. Your assignment isn't to worry about what they're doing with their body and their face expressions and their huffing and puffs. Okay? Your mission is to focus on doing the do. So, avoiding the choice only leaves you in a resentment because you are still trying to outrun discomfort. For over-functioning mothers, I truly ask, how altruistic is your care for others if you do not prioritize self-care? Research in family dynamics suggests that chronic overfunctioning is often a compensatory mechanism for high systemic anxiety. Kerr and Bowen, 1988. People-pleasing is actually a form of manipulation because it creates gridlock, triangulation, and unintentional mess due to not being honest with ourselves. It's the adult equivalent of saying, let me ask my mom. Sorry, she said no, when you never asked your mom and you're an adult. We throw others into the line of fire to avoid a perceived backlash, and then we inevitably face that backlash anyways. We are so uncomfortable with the truth that we don't see the ways the mind takes the long way through avoidance and that externalization of blame. Ladies, zoom in on yourselves for a moment. Do you do for your daughter what you do for your sons? Do you offer your husband the same grace you offer your children? Some of you tolerate disrespect and lack of responsibility from your children, giving them miles of leash access, yet hold your husband to a standard you don't even hold for yourself. This is the classic discomfort displacement cycle. We tolerate disrespect in one area and toss that hot potato of frustration onto our partners because it is easier than facing the aspects of ourselves that feel powerless. Many couples hit what clinical researcher John Gottman, 1994, calls gridlock, often because they assume their growth should be synchronous. And because you think that the growth should be synchronous, you try to force a partner to behave beyond their current level of emotional development, which is a form of control, because real development may require that you walk away from what creates discomfort. Or, take a deep breath for this one, big or, I think it might even be the major or, especially for romantic relationships, because it's so easy to walk away and swipe right and repeat the loop again. So maybe it's requiring you to finally face the heat instead of running to avoidance, emotional cutoff, or ending the relationship. You actually choose to face the urge to overfunction, scan, or overanalyze. You choose a different path. In my work with couples and families, I see how emotional cutoffs have become avoidant loops. It has become easier to avoid than to face the discomfort of being around another human who is messy and unregulated. This is the cycle many relationships are weathering right now, and it continues until someone makes the active choice to step out of the loop. It's that easy, but it requires a conscious daily decision to stay in the chair when things get hot. The emotional stew and the narrative prison. When we can't sit in our own emotional stew, where the muck of shadow, shame, and embarrassment live, we grasp for narratives that make us the righteous victim so we don't have to face our own agency. The nervous system is a pesky thing. It will have us grasping for God, the kids, or even the therapist to validate a version of the story where we are the only one drowning, while failing to see our partner is also self-medicating or imploding. This righteous narcissism prevents us from seeing the relational field as it is. True agency is realizing that you don't need a narrative to justify leaving a dead marriage. The fact that it isn't working is enough to start inquiring and assessing it. Is it me? Assessing that question. Is it the patterns of avoiding discomfort that have gotten us here? It takes two to maintain a cyclical dynamic in a relationship. Many cycles occur because deep down, we benefit from them. They free us from a discomfort hiding somewhere else. This same displacement cycle is happening at the macro level. The internet has become a nervous system exposure lab where people project their parental wounds onto truth tellers because they are too lazy to do the work of reclaiming their own power. They bypass and deflect. They attack the mirror instead of looking in it. They demand comfort instead of the self-reflection. Now, in a nation of dopamine addicts, we all start getting itchy for love bombing political movements and ideologies because they provide relief from discomfort while simultaneously creating an end of conversation dismissiveness. In return, the amygdala, which has no eyes, categorizes this chaos as home because it is so familiar. We are comfortable in the chaos because it's what we were born into. Remember the waves I've talked about? Many of us were born in the chaos waves of life. We get so used to riding those waves that when we finally get to the calm of the lake, we're bored. This tendency to outsource our emotional state to others is often a byproduct of what researchers call emotional contagion, where our nervous systems unconsciously mimic the distress of those around us instead of maintaining an internal baseline. Hatfield et al., 1993. When we seek righteous victimhood, we are often operating from a state of defensive attribution, a cognitive bias where we attribute our failures to external factors to protect our self-esteem from the stew of shame. Shaver, 1970. Furthermore, the boredom we feel in the calm of the lake is a physiological reality. For those raised in high-stress environments, clinical studies on the reception compulsion suggest that the brain may subconsciously seek out familiar chaotic patterns because the neurochemical spike of conflict, it feels more like vitality than the unfamiliar stillness of safety. Levy, 1998. Commute calibration serves as a form of top-down regulation where we use the prefrontal cortex to provide the mental rehearsal necessary to inhibit the amygdala's reflexive survival response. Much of this work, though, it requires awareness of that discomfort. It requires commute calibration, which is the art of practice. It's the art of actually interrupting the loop. This involves practicing calm through mental rehearsal so that when we arrive, we can embody safety. You stop waiting for the other person to change and you choose what you become. You choose that baseline and you end up learning how to become it for yourself. That's true freedom. You stop letting the past write the emotional code for yourself. And you're not just managing your emotions, you lead with them. That was the goal of this work all along, right? Well, Till next time, data collectors. And for those of you interested in some more extended learning, please see the essay for key points for integration, extending reading list, and all of the references, and one reflective question that I'll share with you all before we close out. As you move from reading to practicing, which area of your life currently feels like the hottest potato? The place where you are most tempted to focus on other failures rather than your own capacity for choice. Sit with that, share it, write about it. I'll see y'all in the next one.